This is one of like 3 movies that I've seen in the past 2 years that I watched just because I wanted to and not because of work or a video idea. And look how that turned out. But luckily, it's also by far my favorite movie in years because it has everything that I want in a movie. It's got some surprisingly great action that I wasn't expecting. It's one of the most creative movies I've ever seen. It has an incredibly heartfelt story about love, generational trauma, and missed opportunities while still being mad funny. I'm a big fan of timeline and multiverse movies like Source Code, Looper, and Spider-Verse because there's something about alternate versions of yourself that I really like, but most of the time when these stories get made, the alternate versions either aren't really all that different or interesting, or there's just only a few of them. They also have this weird tendency to feel much smaller than I think they should, considering, the whole multiverse thing. In this, even though it is a small contained story, through the visuals and explanations, it feels like it's huge. They also made it so that even though there are only a few variations, each of them are tied to a central part of our character, Evelyn. No spoilers, but I really like how each one of the alternate versions highlights something about her, and since we don't really have that many multiverse stories to begin with, that's really cool. Usually it's just like, oh, what if this character liked blue instead of red? Or what if this was the exact same character, but in 1930 Chicago? It's a cool aesthetic change, but it's not really something important to the story. When I go into movies, I try to know as little about them as possible. I'll know like an actor, director, or setting, and then go in from there. I just think knowing as little as possible going into a movie makes it more enjoyable for me because then I don't really have any expectations. See my video about why trailers are bad. With that in mind, I thought this movie was going to be way more drama than anything else, which I was cool with. But then there's these really well choreographed fights mixed in with some pretty great humor that really only gets better as the movie goes on. For the performances, there's not a bad performance in this from any of the actors, but I think the 3 main female characters played by Michelle Yeoh, Stephanie Hsu, and Jamie Lee Curtis are all my favorites in this. And I don't think that any of the male characters are bad, but I just found the women in this way more interesting. I don't really want to pick favorites, but Michelle Yeoh used a shield like a sign spinner in a fight, so, there's that. Now, when I said earlier that this was one of the most creative movies I've seen, I meant that in pretty much every aspect. The story has an interesting take on the multiverse and how you can traverse it that I've never seen before, and the visuals are just amazing. There's so many cool things in this movie that I don't have the technical vocab to really talk about, but there's just so much going on with different aspect ratios and colors. It's like the directors, Daniels, Kwan, and Shiner, just took everything they loved and made a bomb-ass movie with it. Like, there's multiple times where I was like, yo, this would be something really cool to try out in a video. Although, unfortunately, there are a few moments where I would worry about someone with epilepsy because there's a lot of prolonged flashing and color shifting really fast, especially near the end. So if you or someone you know is sensitive to that, you should keep that in mind. I'd assume that it's actually fine because I do not think that they would put the movie out if it would give people seizures, but I'm not a doctor. Personally, I still love the sequence because it's long enough that your eyes are dilated and you get really locked in, but it also seems like something that probably should have a warning label on. But back to all the positives, there's just something about watching a really interesting movie that gets me inspired to make something. Either because I think the story asks some interesting questions, or because there's something visually that I really like and want to recreate in some way. Like there's this really cool glass shattering effect that happens in the movie whenever they're going through their multiverse shenanigans, and if you watched even a few of my videos, you know I've been trying to find a cool way to break up a scene like this that I really like, and I haven't completely figured it out yet. But when I was watching this, I couldn't help but be excited at the different effects and things that I might not be able to do now, but I know can be done, and it gives me some inspiration to do it. I honestly don't really have any real criticisms aside from the thing about the flashing that I mentioned, and maybe that the movie starts out a little slower than I would have liked, or the parts are structured a little weird, but none of that actually impacted how much I enjoyed watching it. The last time that I felt this jumpy and excited after watching a movie was probably back when I saw Sorry to Bother You, and that's one of the things that actually got me into screenwriting and actually thinking about starting a channel. Sure, I'm not making Boots Riley type beats on here, but the mindset, I think, is still there. Honestly, I think I'm gonna watch it again soon and see how I feel about it, but I was really blown away by this movie, and hopefully when you watch it, which you should, you will feel the same way.